Welcome to another edition of the Sim Racing Garage. I'm Barry Rowland, and in this episode, we'll be reviewing the latest version of the Accuforce direct drive force feedback wheel system known as the V2. Now, I did have some issues with getting the original V1 system dialed in to my liking. But of course, the Sim Experience team has continued updating and improving their direct drive system as it has matured. Now, let's put this V2 Your Way edition of the Accuforce direct drive wheel system through the SRG review process and find out what they've been up to. So let's get to it. Now for a closer look at the Your Way Accuforce version 2 kit. First off, we'll look at the accessories before we get to the actual motor and controller box. You get a 6-foot electrical cord. You don't need much with these kits actually. And I actually bought this unit secondhand or used. It wasn't used very much, but it's almost new. But this is the USB cable that I believe comes with the kit, and it's a nice one. It's got the gold-plated ends on it, and it also has the ferrite cores for noise reduction in your lines, your EMI interference. We've also got this guy, the inline power switch, so that you don't have to plug it in and unplug it every time on your controller box when you want to start your system up. So you just, of course, plug this into the controller box, and this will go into the 6-foot power cord, and good to go. Pretty simple stuff. Right. Also get 4 bolts. I'm assuming these are meant to be the mounting bolts, and some nuts and washers, lock washers it looks like, to actually mount the motor to your desk or to your rig or whatever you happen to be mounting it to. Simple enough, that's all you get. But that's all you need, really. And that's why a lot of guys buy this kit, because they've already got everything else they need. All right, let's look at the controller box first, because it's the lightest one. This thing actually comes out to about 3 pounds and 13 ounces for this controller box, which is pretty light, actually, especially when you try to compare it to the motor assembly over here. Now, it looks like we've got a power supply in here, like the old controller box when I did the original Accuforce review. It looks like it's kind of the same setup for the box, which works. It's a plastic box, and it looks like one of those injection molded bits, and of course we'll actually have a closer look at what's really inside of here when we get there. On the outside we have the power plug, and we have the data plug on one side, and then on this other side we've got 2 USB plugs. One is for, this one over here is for the going to a USB hub, as far as the instructions say that anyway. And the other one over here is going to straight to your PC. So this is some kind of a data connector here. I'm not exactly sure what they use that for. It could be for upgrading firmware. It could be for some potential accessories you can plug into this, and maybe use this as a USB device for a controller board. And also we have this little button here. And I would have to say that's a reset button, but like I said, once we get this, take a look inside, we'll be able to see what that is. So that's probably a reset button. And I know they've got 2 other holes in here, and there actually are plugs. I don't know if you're going to be able to see those plugs in there, but yeah, see that little plug there, both of them? I'm assuming probably one of those would be like a firmware update plug. Looks like a maybe, I don't know, it's hard to tell from here, but you can see the power supply in there. And on the other side we don't have any vents, so we've only got vents, cooling vents on the top, and I already know the motor, this fan is actually blowing air out of the top, so it's sucking in the air on this side. Right, pretty simple. Now the motor. Again, I like the new motor. Or not new motor, it's the same motor, but I like the new form factor, how compact it is, instead of the big housing that used to be on here that you see here. That thing was like a big tent around the motor. And now we've got a nice sleek design here, which I really like a lot more. And I'm sure most people do, because it takes up less room. And yeah, it's just a better setup to begin, just overall, as far as just looking at it, at aesthetics and ergonomics. We've got this nice big pulley on the top here. Nice solid piece. And it has a little bolt here. Keep this cord out of my way. It's got a little bolt here on this hub that we'll be taking off, because we're going to pull the hub off when we actually take a look inside. This whole assembly here, including this cable, runs 19 pounds and 6 ounces, so it's not a light assembly. Make sure you have something substantial to bolt this to. And yeah, that's about all we can really see back here. On the bottom, this is our mounting bolts. Now, on the front, first off, before I get to that, it looks like this is where the motor bolts are. We'll find out once we, like I said, once we get to the inside look. And I'd really rather have this thing bolted up using the front because of the way my rig is. And these holes in the bottom for mounting, see how close they are? So the mounting pressure, I'd rather see the mounting pressure spread across a bigger area here on the bottom mounting plate. When it's like this, and especially on the mounting plate that you'll see how I mounted this later on, it actually, because it's so close together where your two bolts are attached to your rig, it actually causes a little bit of up and down movement when you're, nothing that you can really tell. And of course it depends on what you're mounting to, is how secure that's going to be. I just would have liked to see something spread out a little bit further. But at aesthetics, you know, aesthetics and design is for aesthetics, ergonomics, sometimes you're limited to what you can do to bolt it on. But again, that's why I was thinking it'd be nice to be able to have some way to bolt it to the front. And I'm actually going to check that out once I get into this housing. I see these two bolts here going in, and I was thinking maybe that would be a good place to do it. And we also have these two little screws here on the front plate, and those are actually, I believe, holding this housing, this little RJ12 connector. But again, we'll be able to see that. Nice cooling vents on the top. Again, very nice. Although I'm not sure if this motor even gets that warm. I don't, you know, when I was running it, I couldn't feel it, but I'm sure it gets a little bit warm. All motors do. But yeah, it's nice to have a nice cooling vents around here. Some good air circulation, even though the bottom doesn't really have, well, it's got a way to suck the, there it is. So if you see in here, this metal where it mounts at, see this piece of metal here is actually bent in. So we've got access here, and you can see the access there. So air can get in here and just flow out of the top. All right, now let's take a quick look at the actual cable here. And this is, I would say, it kind of reminds me of computer cables. If you build computers or ever have built a computer on the power supplies, you're familiar with what this looks like. Very nice shrink tubing done here. Very heavy, thick, on top of some already pretty thick shrink tubing. We got a nice ferrite core in here for the electrical flow in here, because this is the power line, the big plug. That's where all the power is going through. So nice to see that they've got a ferrite sink or core wrapped around that. And then there's the data plug. Again, very easy to plug these in. Only thing, and it's really not that big of a concern, but I know I have seen on the internet before that these type of plugs, it's better to have this kind of setup mounted somewhere, or not mounted, but sitting somewhere where you don't have to move it around a lot or unplug it or put a lot of stress on the wires bending up and down. If you have a motion rig, just be aware that these kind of plugs on the back here, these little squares, the little squares the wires are going into where the pins go in and attach, they can be abrasive against the wire if it's doing a lot of bending or moving and stuff. So just something to be aware of. I'm sure it's not a problem most of the time, or it's probably rarely a problem where you get some chafing on a wire there maybe. But yeah, that's the only thing about this type of plug. Right, other than that, very nice braid everywhere. It's a 6-foot nice length cable, so it gives you a lot of different options as far as mounting this and mounting your box. Remember, the box has a fan in it, even though it doesn't bother me here at the SRG because, well, noise is really not a concern. It can be a little bit loud, and but it's a fan, you know. So I've never heard a quiet fan. But yeah, this obviously will allow you to mount this further away from your sitting position if it bothers you, the fan noise bothers you or whatever, or you just have to have it mounted somewhere further away. Nice to have plenty of cable here, because yeah, this is the data cable. It's a complex cable. You don't want to have to hack into it and then patch it and extend it or anything like that. On the back here, we've got a nice, looks like a big piece of industrial type heat shrink on here. I don't know if that's the glue on, you know, the sticky heat shrink. I don't know if you guys know what that is, but they also make a heat shrink tape that's thicker, more industrial, and it's got like a little stickiness to it when you actually slide the cord in, and then when you warm it up, it sticks to it. But anyway, well done. We've got about, looks like 8 screws on the bottom here holding, it looks like it's just holding this bottom plate on, which is a nice, looks like about an 1/8 inch steel plate. So that's a nice secure mounting surface here. I like that. Yeah, that looks good. And we've actually got a reel. Some guys may have been wondering, they see the carbon fiber front on this, which looks cool. I like the carbon fiber. But if you look on the bottom here, as I handle this 20-pound motor, trying to keep it from slapping everything around with that cord, this is actually a nice piece. It looks like about 3/16 of carbon fiber. So it's a real piece of carbon fiber there. Well done, instead of just putting a sticker on it. Right. Okay, well, there's not a whole lot to see here, obviously. It's just the motor and the controller box. The more interesting things are going to be inside. And yeah, so I guess that's about it for the closer look. And what we're going to do next is, I think I'm going to do the controller box first, but it really doesn't matter. But we're going to get to the look inside segment next and see how these things are running. So now we'll go ahead and see what's inside the controller box first. And that's just 6 Phillips screws here. Should be very simple to get inside of this. So I just want to show you the screws real quick here. They're the button heads, or pan heads, some people call them. But you'll notice the thread here is actually a machine thread. So it's not a lot of plastic housings that you open will have that coarse thread on it. They call the plastic thread. So it digs into the plastic. So that means we probably have some steel or brass threaded inserts in this case. So let's find out. I should be able to just lift this up, I believe. There it goes. All right, so there's our cover. Not much to see here, just the usual plastic, look at injection molded stuff. Seems to be pretty tough. Set that aside. All right, so now we've got the business end of this. And you can see there obviously is a power supply sitting up here and a piece of, looks like foam. And I guess this foam, yeah, if I push this power supply towards the front a little bit, the foam comes out. So obviously this foam is in here to keep this power supply from sliding back and forth too much, or if you drop it, it has some kind of an impact cushion. So yeah, put that aside. And this is probably a Meanwell, I'm guessing. Meanwell power supply. Let's try to pull this off very carefully because I don't want to mess it up. Before I do that though, there's the brass threaded inserts. Yep, for sure. Well done. Now, I don't want to stretch any wires obviously, so I'm going to be very careful. Go ahead and turn this around this way. And kind of tilt it up a little bit. It looks like we've got a little scratching on it there. And that's why. There is a little rubber bumper in there that fits on top of a standoff. See a little silver standoff right there in the middle? And apparently this has come off due to movement of the power supply, and that's why it scratched it up a little bit. No big deal, we'll just press that right back on. Good to go. Now, you can see it's a very clean configuration here. I really like how clean and neat all this is. The two main power supply connectors coming over here. Of course, we have our mains connection over here. So that means our AC is coming in and it's coming out here. I believe this is going to be a DC going to the actual board itself. And what kind of power supply is this actually? Doesn't have any. Oh, there it is. Gotta look around the other side. Right. So this is the power supply they're using, and that's a Meanwell SP320 24 volt. That should be 320, or is that 320 volts, 24 amp? No, it's 24 volt. Okay, 24 volt switching power supply. This is a good power supply. It's a standard industry power supply that is used in a lot of electronics all over the world. These Meanwell power supplies, a lot of guys who build stuff use them all the time because they're pretty darn dependable, and they're pretty good as far as the fluctuations of the power coming out of this power supply. It does a really good job, and that's why they're so popular. Right, and not the cheapest power supply you can get either. So again, well done to Sim Experience for getting some good equipment in here. Right, now we're going to look at the box itself. Not a whole lot to see here. I'm going to keep this all together so I don't stretch my wires out and break everything. And it says Sim Experience, and this says version 1.01 on the board, and it says 2014. So it looks like the board is the same board that I had in the other controller box for the version 1, we're calling it now, of course, Accuforce. So, but the firmware obviously has been updated and continue to develop this. There might be some little differences on this board, I don't know, but I can only know what I read on the board. So yeah, and we can see the big resistor down here, big fat sucker for the power. And yeah, it's just a really neat, well done board there, little PCB. And there's little holes I was talking about before coming in here. They actually are not plugs. Remember these little holes here? Look like they were plugs. They're actually just part of the circuit board down there. See that? There's a couple of resistors actually in that location. So you got some good light on it there, as you can see it. So obviously not plugs, but yes, that is a little button in there. This little reset button, you can see it sitting on the board there. Right. Not a whole lot to see here as far as the plugs and everything. It was pretty simple, which is good. Simple is good. If anything on this board went bad, it looks like it'd be very easy to replace it. They could actually just send you a replacement. You could pop it in, you're good to go. Same thing with the power supply. So yeah, I think that was well done. And they've actually got some rubber bumpers here on these standoffs in the plastic housing. These little bumpers here to keep this power supply from going sideways. Maybe they could have put a little bit more foam. Well, you can't put any foam here. Here's the problem, obviously. It's this is where they're pulling the cool air in, and yeah, so, and I'm just wondering how that works because they got the vents over here. But anyway, there's plenty of circulation. I've never heard of any one of these things burning up. It might have failed, but I don't think it's from burning up. And again, easy enough to replace, but maybe we could have put some more foam, just a piece over here, straight down maybe, so it's kind of in between the slots to keep, because it still can move this way, like that, if you hold it up like that. And then this becomes loose and moves around. But yeah, I try to turn it different ways and it's still kind of loose in there, but no big deal. Yeah, it's, like I said, if it survives shipping and you get it to your home, unless you abuse this thing, I don't see it really mattering that much. But I might actually put a piece of foam down in there myself when I finish with this. Right. So yeah, not much else to see. How simple is that, right? All right, so it looks like they're pretty much the same controller, same setup as it was for the version 1 wheel, as far as I can tell. And you know, even the board says 2014 on it. But yeah, they have done a lot of firmware updates on this system, and you can tell it in the performance of the system. Right, so what we're going to do is go ahead and button this back up. Just pop this top back on, and then we're going to go over and see how far we can go on this guy as far as getting down into the internals for this. I'm hoping it's going to be easy and I don't have to pull everything off, but we'll just have to wait and see when we get there. So we'll get to the motor look inside segment next. Okay, so now we've got the motor assembly disassembled, and we can take a look at what it looks like. First off, let's just talk a little bit about the cover. Actually a nicely done cover. Again, I've said it before, I like it better than the bigger, bulkier cover they had before. This is a steel plate, looks like about 3/16, and it has a nice powder coated finish on all the plates. And the side plates, and I mentioned this before when we were doing closer look, you can see that this piece here has been cut and bent in, and that allows air to come in here on both sides. So in a convection type of situation where, because there's no fan in this case obviously, so that the hot air can just, it sucks the cool air on the side, and then the hot air will come out of the top piece here with all those vents cut into it. Again, nicely done powder coating on this. I really like this. They really did a good job with this, I think. And I like quality stuff, as you guys well know. Also on the case, this was the front panel, the carbon fiber piece that we mentioned before. And these are the bolts. These are accessory bolts, apparently. And yeah, you wouldn't want to mount your motor to something, a plate or something, with these bolts, I don't think, because I don't think that the carbon fiber would stand the torque stresses over a long period of time. But anyway, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's what that's for, accessories. You can put like maybe a button box or something on here, I don't know. And again, that's just the business end of our RJ12 connector back there. Right. So let's talk a little bit about, oh, wait a minute, one more thing before we get to the motor. This is the hub. And I really like this hub compared to the old hub. The old hub actually had a piece on top of it that was part of the electrical connection for the wheel electronics, and the slip ring, if you will, had that nose piece on it. Then it had a piece behind it. But this is, you can see right through here, see, that's a solid piece of aluminum, because my magnet will not stick to this one. This falls right off. So a nice piece of machined aluminum. And I love nice machined bits of metal, as you guys probably know by now if you've been watching my videos. Right. And of course we've got the pattern cut in here for the 70 millimeter adapter. I think this is only a 3 section adapter here. In fact, I've got my thing. Let's see if I can mic this out real quick and see if it's a 58 or 50.8 mil centers on here. I'm not sure it will be though. No, they're 37s. I'm thinking this might be spacing. I could be wrong here. For like a NASCAR pattern, you know, the NASCAR wheels, those deep dishes, they have 3 bolts in them. I could be wrong. Anyway, or it could be something that the Accuforce wheel system, their quick release actually bolts to that. Who knows? I don't have one of those, so I can't tell you. There's the cinching bolt here that will go down in the threaded chamber that's been cut, or hole that's been cut in there, and it comes out. I don't know if you can see that little hole there, but let's see. If I hold it upside down, we can get some better light on it. There it is. And of course the bolt will come through there and attach to the shaft on a hole that's actually milled into the end of the shaft. Now we'll look at that. Oh, and then by the way, nicely powder coated piece too. I really like that. So let's take a look at the front. Now I'm going to have to be very careful moving this around because I got this big harness on here now. I could, tell you what, let me just go ahead and disconnect that too. That way I don't have to drag this around. Okay, so again, a very heavy little stepper motor we have here. And the shaft right here is actually a 1/2 inch in diameter. I already mic'd it out. And it looks like it goes back to more like 3/4 of an inch when it goes back into the actual motor in there. See how it kind of bevels out right here, or right there? It kind of bevels out, so it's been turned down to a 1/2 inch to where we actually, this is our end of it. So this is where we get all of our feedback through this 1/2 inch shaft, right? Because that's where our hands are attached, or the wheel and then our hands. Right, nice sealed bearings in there, or I don't know if that's a sealed bearing or just a dust cover on the bearing, but nice bearings in there. And again, a very hefty little piece of equipment here. I didn't take it all the way off because there's no labeling on this motor, and this flat piece kind of helps me from accidentally rolling around and do something. Nice power wires going in here with this ferrite core on it. Again, nice to eliminate any potential EMIs, even though I think maybe a few people have had trouble with EMIs running these, but not too many. They're pretty well taken care of with the way that they wired these things and set up the electronics. They do a good job there. Right. Let's go around to the back end here, and this is the business end. Some of this powder coating flakes off when you take things off. And what we have here, obviously, is the rear of the rotor, or the shaft. And you can see there it's got a threaded piece in here, a threaded insert there, and that's what we would use to actually press this sensor disc off. And there's the sensor disc. And if you look closely, I'm not sure how well this will show up, but there is a line over here. See a little line on the metal? And this is a HS40A Honest sensor. H-O-N-E-S-T, Honest. Honestly, it's a sensor for stepper motors. And here's a quick look at the data sheet. And you can see there, it's just a quick look just to see what it's saying it is. And of course, it's a stepper motor encoder, and shows you the max resolution being 16,000. Okay. Now I'm going to set this back down and show you the other piece of this, which is the electronics board that is in the little cover. That's where our plug was. And this, again, I don't know how well you're going to be able to see this, but I'll try to hold it still so you can. See this little brown piece down here? Right down in here? That little piece there is the actual optical encoder. So imagine that line that we just saw in the little disc here is what this optical sensor is reading, because that's the only line. It's a very nicely fine line, machined, rather marked line on there, some kind of a laser print maybe or something. But anyway, that's how it's working. That's the encoder they're using. And again, you can always go look up the data sheet yourself if you want to get more information or more details about the particular encoder or stepper encoder that are using on this. Right, so not much else to see here really. Yeah, that's pretty much it. So what I'm going to do is put everything back together, and yeah, once we have it all back together, then of course I'll put it back on the rig and test it and make sure that I didn't mess anything up by taking it apart. I'm pretty sure I didn't, but you never know with these things. And yeah, so when we come back, we'll actually have it, I will just show it to you when it's mounted to the rig, and then we'll take it from there. All right, I thought I'd show you guys this wheel as you boot it up, how it initializes. It does a spin back and forth. If you've got a wheel with a USB cord on it, you might want to keep it off of this when you do that. You can see as it spins around. If you have a USB cord on this, yeah, it's going to yank it around pretty good and probably give you a shorter lifespan on your wheel in general. Right, so here we are mounted, and everything looks good. It feels good. It feels solid. And the only thing is, it's not really a complaint, it's just it's something I would have liked to see how close these bolts are, see how close together they are. I would like to see those spread out a bit. And you can, underneath you can see the nuts even give it even a closer look. If you, in other words, it's more of a pivot point that we could probably reduce that pivot point if they spread them out. But I'm sure they did that for a reason, whatever the reasons were. And well, it is what it is. I just would have liked to see it spread out a little bit more for just a bit more solid mount. We'll get to the configuration segment next. All right, so this is the configuration segment of the review, and right off the bat I'm going to tell you guys I'm not going to go very deep into this because the Sim Commander software is a very deep piece of software indeed. It can do so many things. You can spend not only hours but days working with configurations on cars and tracks in different games and just having a blast if that's what you want to do. And then on the other end of that extreme, you can actually just load up Sim Commander and one time configure the device settings that you want, like you would in, say, a Thrustmaster or a Fanatic or even the OSW SimuCube or Bodner's driver. You just configure some basic driver settings in there, then you could save it to the controller in the system that you're using, and then off you go. Then you just use the game settings to actually make changes to feel. That's one of the ways you can do it, and the most simplistic. But let's take a look at first, now that I have this up here, I'm going to go to my iRacing Universal, which is a default configuration that they pop up there. And when we, first off, before I do that, I'm going to get my control center up. And this is where we're going to make all our configuration changes. Now, if I wasn't going to use the Sim Commander to run the wheel, what I would do is I'd go in settings here, go up to my settings tab, and that opens up all the settings, appearance and things like that. It defaults to the appearance. We'll go ahead and get that up and open up the Sim Device Manager. And there it is. And that defaults apparently to the Sim Vibe settings, which I'm not running. But I am running the Accuforce steering wheel, and you can see it there. And just click on that. Now once I'm up here, this looks familiar, or kind of familiar, to what we see in a lot of regular drivers for other wheel systems. And basically we've got our intensity, the force feedback amount we want, some smoothing if you want it, degrees of rotation, and yeah, you can set these to whatever you want. And this is one thing about this interface they have here. It's very tricky to get exactly the number you want with these sliders. They kind of jump around a lot, and I wish that you could just go over here to the number and double click on it or something and highlight it and just dial in what you want, because you can't really, there's no way, I've tried different ways to actually do that, but you can't do it. But anyway, back to the main thing here. First off, mode. Which mode do you want it to be in? And these are the 4 basic modes up here. We got recruit, soft, default, and high. And really that's the force that the wheel is going to be running at. I'm guessing it's some kind of an amperage selection inside the firmware when we pick whichever one. Default should be the normal one. So you could actually just go default there, leave it at 100% intensity so that the motor will give you 100% of the default amperage, whatever that happens to be, and then maybe mess around with some smoothing or something later on, or right now if you want. And then you can go down, scroll down, you can see we have stop dampener, spring, friction dampener, inertia, the usual kinds of things that we can change in the feel of a wheel. And I'd almost missed the stop spring there. So once we have the settings we want, all we have got to do is go in here and save settings to controller, and it says save is successful, just like saving to any other wheel system, or similar to it at least. Anyway, now that we've saved all this, we could actually just close the control panel. I can close iRacing. I can actually just pick up a regular browser window here and just go ahead and log into iRacing like I normally do when I'm going to run a game, or rather run in iRacing, the game. Go to test and then pick what I want. Now I can go in and make further adjustments to the usual suspects that we have in a particular iRacing game, which is the dampening, the amount of force feedback, the minimal force that we're feeling, and of course linear settings and such that we see in iRacing. And if I was going into Assetto Corsa, if I was going into Automobilistica, if I was going into Project Cars 2, same thing would apply. I would just adjust what I could in the game. Right, because I've already got the basic settings set up in the wheel controller now. Now, that works fine, and yeah, actually I've got it to feel pretty good just doing that. So yeah, you could just run it that way, and actually I understand there's more than a few folks doing that. But we can also use the power of Sim Commander, and I'm going to open it up, open it back up, and I'm going to start an instance, or by clicking on a profile, one of those profiles I had. And when I do that, okay, there's the profiles up here. I'm going to go ahead and go to my universal one again, and I'm going to double click it. Attach to already game. It says the game's already running because obviously I have my window open over here, which is good. And then I'll go back over and grab the control panel, like so. And I'll go to my output mixer, and I can see my wheel there. And you can see it just has the basic Accuforce steering wheel here. I'm just going to do a drop down, and there's all the things that are already set. Now, if you'll notice on the universal one, it's kind of peculiar because game force feedback is on, and so is the smoothing for it, which usually you see those two together on. But if you scroll down here, it's got engine RPM, but it's also got steering foundation, feedback foundation. I'm not sure why it does that, but I don't think you want to run both of those at once, but I suppose you could. It really doesn't matter. But I would turn that off and just run the game force feedback. And when I'm in using Sim Commander and adjusting things in Sim Commander, depending on the game, I was using game force feedback or I was using steering feedback foundation, which, you know, it's, again, the rotors run deep. I could spend a lot of time trying to explain different ways I was using it, but I just don't have the time in this video to do that. And again, there's a lot of information to be found all over the internet for this stuff, and everybody's different anyway. So my settings obviously would probably not mesh with your settings. But anyway, back to this. Once I have game force feedback setting on, and now when I actually go into a actual instance of the game and I go to the options tab, when I have game force feedback set up, and unfortunately I can't drag this options thing up there and I can't show you that, but all of the force feedback window will be grayed out except for the enable force feedback. Everything else is grayed out. You can't adjust anything anymore. All adjustments will be done in here in your control panel, which is great, really, because, you know, the options window, you have to be out of your car to get to that in iRacing anyway, and in most games it's that way. You have to get back out to adjust things. But here, we can actually, even when I'm in the car running down the track, I can actually adjust a slider and feel that adjustment as I'm doing it in real time. Very, very cool feature of this software. You can do it dynamically right on the track. Very, very cool. So you can see right away immediately what's happening with your changes and whether you like them or not, so you don't go too far in the wrong direction and then get lost a little bit and trying to find your way back to a default configuration. Right. So if I go in here and turn off game force feedback, let me turn that off, I didn't mean to hit that, and I go down and turn steering foundation feedback on. As soon as I turn off the game force feedback, if you look at the options window in iRacing, everything comes alive again. The windows aren't grayed out. You can actually uncheck and check linear mode. You can use the strength, dampening, and minimum force sliders again, dampen oscillations or not. So all that's alive again. And when you turn steering foundation, or feedback foundation rather, back on, that stays open, because now it doesn't matter, because now in foundation mode, actually, we know that Sim Commander is actually taking the telemetry raw signals from the game and bypassing the filtering of the game, or any filtering or feedback effects that the game's sending out, and applying its own foundation feedbacks, or effects rather, and feedback. So then we can change that in here also and adjust to taste. Again, I'm not going to go deep into this as far as that goes. It's just the 3 different ways that you can run this software. And I highly suggest that you go through all three ways and play with it as much as you can. Again, download some other configurations other guys have uploaded to the Owners Club, and that's the easy thing to do too. Go ahead and, of course, do the basics, which is get in the car, run the car a couple of laps. Don't try to kill yourself or go off track. You know, just run a couple of decent laps, and then go into the Auto Tune Wizard and use that track to set a default profile up for that car. Then you can play around after that. That's the easiest way to do it, and the way I would recommend when you first get started with Sim Commander. Just go in, launch the default profile, go in, run your couple of laps, then go into telemetry and do the wizard, if you will, the Auto Tune Wizard, and get you a good default setup. Well, good is relative, because some of these setups I got from the Auto Tune were not very good, but most of the time they were. And then you can adjust from there. So that's really what I wanted to touch on without getting just, like I said, I could spend hours talking about what this software can do. But I think at the end of the day, most of us just want to be able to jump in our car after a hard day at work and just start driving and not be tweaking for hours on something, even though it's nice to have that option if that's what you want to do. Like I said, Sim Commander is a fabulous piece of software. It just does so many things, not just with the Accuforce wheel, but also with their motion platforms and, of course, their Sim Vibe. Yeah, it's just a fantastic piece of software. So with that being said, what I'm going to do now is go in and do some driving in different games just to show you and make some comments on what I felt when I was actually driving the wheel in those games. And yeah, this is, like I said, I hope nobody's too disappointed that I didn't go deeper into this software. But like I said, there's just a ton of information out there on it already. I really don't have that much to add to it. In fact, that's where I went to actually learn how to use this. And yeah, like I said, just remember the three basic ways you can run it, and just run it any way you want to, because that's what this is all about. So now, let's get to the driving. All right, so here we are in iRacing in the Lotus 79 at Sebring. And again, my favorite car for testing all things hardware. And at first, with the Accuforce, I did some laps, and I did the Auto Tune Wizard, and I didn't really agree with the Auto Tune Wizard. I've done other cars, other tracks that felt better than it did with the 79. But the 79, and this is one of the reasons I use this Lotus 79, it is a hard beast to figure out as far as, because the suspension is so tight on this thing. As you can see, all the shocks and jolts that you get from your wheel being in this car in this particularly bumpy track. And that's why I use it, because it's a good bar for me to have, you know, as far as what other wheels feel like, and then compare another wheel to that one. Anyway, so yeah, the Auto Tune didn't quite work for me that well, and I did end up, however, getting a feeling in this wheel that I really did like eventually, and that was just simply running game force feedback and the game for smoothing. And yeah, I was able to dial that in to where it really became comfortable and predictable, and I was really able to handle the car pretty much as well as I handle it with any other wheel system, direct drive or otherwise. And yeah, so I can't complain about the iRacing experience I had with this wheel. It was actually pretty good once I got it dialed in. And again, the Auto Tune Wizard is kind of a hit and miss thing, and I think most people would agree with that. Sometimes it works better than others, but the magic about it is it gives you a baseline. It gives you something to at least start from, instead of just starting a brand new configuration and dropping in effects and then going from there. Unless you've got a lot of experience with Sim Commander and you know exactly what you're doing, then you know you can do that kind of thing, which just takes some time. You know, it's a learning curve just like anything else. But yeah, once I had this dialed in, I was really having a good time. I did lap after lap, and my lap time stayed within a few tenths of each other, which is usually a good sign that I'm able to get a consistent performance out of whatever I'm using, be it pedals or, in this case, the Accuforce direct drive wheel. So yeah, once I had this up and running to where I wanted it to, then yeah, I became very comfortable with it. And I think the force feedback, the amount of force feedback that you get from this wheel is going to be plenty for the average sim racer, or most sim racers or drivers in any game that they're using. The only thing is, the difference between, say, like the higher end, not higher end, but more expensive direct drive wheel systems is their motors are more powerful, and that power in that motor is not all about torque. It's not just, oh, I got more torque than you do, so my wheel's better. It's about how the torque is delivered and the bandwidth of that torque. In other words, the dynamic range of that torque, and that's where these bigger motors come in, the more powerful motors. They just give you a bit more dynamic range in the force feedback effects than you get from the Accuforce, and obviously with more torque you would expect that. But again, at the prices we're selling for right now, yeah, it's not much of an argument, to be honest with you. It's unless that's what you're looking for, something like that. Right. So then we're going to switch over to, I believe it's Assetto Corsa. There it is, and we're in the Corvette CR7 or C7R. Anyway, this is, you know, Assetto Corsa has always been a mixed bag for me on the force feedback that I get from it. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad, depending on the track I'm on and the car I'm in. But I was able to dial in a pretty good feeling with this, and I actually used foundation force feedback in this game and tweaked that to my settings that I liked. And I did run the auto tune wizard, and it came back with again something that I wasn't really comfortable with, but it was easy enough for me to put in. I can't exactly remember what I put in, more smoothing or less centering spring. I think it was less centering spring, but yeah, the foundation feedback rather, it seemed to work well for me here in Assetto Corsa in this Corvette, and it made it feel less vague, the usual kind of a vague feeling I get from Assetto Corsa when I'm running a direct drive wheel on it. And I'm not sure why it does that, but I was able to dial some of that out. And working with any wheel system you can, but yeah, it was just a little bit easier, I think, with this Accuforce because of the Sim Commander, very powerful, as we know, software that allows us to tweak all these little settings and just keep messing with it until we get it right. And also the cool thing is that while I'm driving on the track, I can stop and then change something, or even while I'm rolling down the track, I can change a slider in one of the effects and I can feel it right away. So that is a big plus also. You know, Sim Commander software, you know, you just can't say enough about what you can do with the software. It runs, the waters run deep, as they say. Right. So now let's get over to, I believe it was Project Cars 2. I did a little quick stint over there, and yeah, I did the same thing, auto tune. It actually came back with a pretty decent one the first time. I think it was running, I think it told me the game force feedback is what I was using when it came back with the auto tune. But yeah, I ran this for a while, and I think I was able to get it better feeling than I have before with other direct drive wheels because of all the little settings you can do in Sim Commander. So yeah, overall, driving this wheel, I had a much better experience, I believe, than the last time I had the V1 Accuforce wheel. And so yeah, I really don't have much to complain about here. This wheel has performed to expectations, especially at the new price point you can get these at. We'll get to the final thoughts next. Final thoughts on the Accuforce V2 Your Way direct drive force feedback wheel kit. The guys at Sim Experience have made noticeable improvements to their Accuforce system since the last time I had one in the SRG. When I had the V1 direct drive wheel kit, I could never seem to get it dialed in to the feel that I liked, no matter how much time I spent in the Sim Commander control panel, and I did put a lot of hours into experimenting with the force feedback in both game and foundation modes. I just couldn't get it dialed in for my personal preference. Now, all that has changed. I know that the firmware has been constantly improved as this direct drive platform has matured, and it shows. I was able to get a force feedback feel that I was happy with in all three games I was testing in. One required game force feedback, the other felt better with foundation force feedback, and I was even able to get a satisfactory setup by just tweaking the main device settings, saving them to the controller, and then shutting Sim Commander down. Then using the force feedback settings available in whatever game I was playing, and I was able to tune in a pretty good feel. Which brings me to a big plus with the Accuforce system, the ability to run it in 3 different modes and still get a quite usable and comfortable result. I also think this system has enough torque to satisfy most sim racers out there today, with only a small ding for lacking the force feedback dynamic range that some of the other more powerful direct drive systems out there have. But of course, to get that extra power, you're going to have to pay for it. There is a price difference to consider. Now, the build quality of the motor assembly is, well, just top notch. with quality materials and a nice powder coat finish. The new one-piece aluminum hub is just a thing of beauty. Of course, not everything was perfect. I would like to see a different way to mount the motor assembly. I think you could get more of a solid or rock steady mounting result if the holes were spread further apart on the bottom of the plate that we are using to mount it to our platforms. Or, even better, a way to front mount the motor to the type of mounting plates that support that. I would love to be able to mount this motor to the 15mm plate that is on my P1 rig. Other than that, I really don't have any other issues with the version 2 of the Accuforce direct drive wheel system. And of course, the biggest news this summer has been the summer sale that SimExperience has been putting on. And I don't know how many months it's been running, probably about 3, and it's still running today because I actually tried it. And the thing is, if you go to SimExperience website, you order one of these wheels and you use the promo code SUMMER18, you can get this Your Way wheel kit for just $750 plus shipping, which for me I think would have been like $39. I just don't know how you can beat that if you're in the market for a direct drive force feedback wheel system. I'm Barry Rowland. Thanks again for watching the Sim Racing Garage channel. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button and help support the SRG by visiting our website at simracinggarage.com.